I don't know which mic I have. That mic, this mic, so there's a lot of feedback.
You guys hear in the back?
Can you hear? Louder? Okay. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank John. You go by Brother Richards or Professor Richards or either one, all the above. And he's a good friend, and we were out to lunch one day talking about these things, and he thought this might be interesting to have me come and talk about my experience directly with the 4-hour work week. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and mostly a little review of the book, but I want to really talk about things that I had already been doing in my own life, in my business, so that I could do other things besides work all day. So let me move on here. That first picture I had of the beach is just because it's pretty in the beach. And I always have to laugh at these pictures of the beach because, this is not a vacation. And they're the funniest pictures if you ever have to look at stock photography stuff, because there's the guy's in a suit, and a tie, either a missionary perhaps, but with a laptop on the beach. And so if you find yourself like this in 5 years or 10 years and you are on vacation, you got to bring your laptop, then you've already broken a big rule of the 4-hour work week. That's not going to work. So don't do that. I want to first talk about being busy, really busy. And the reason I just call it that is because that's a typical, if you haven't seen somebody for a long time, people, how you doing? Great. And then it's always, I'm really busy. And somehow that's become something important, I guess, that we always have to say we're busy. And I guess if you said you weren't busy, then people would think you're lazy or something. But that's just not the case. There are a lot of other things you can do with your life than being busy all the time. So I want to talk about specific areas of being busy. I want to talk about the 4-hour work week and just keep it really short, kind of review the book, but give you an overview. By the way, how many are in the process of reading it? Good. Let me give you just my view. I read it about a year ago. And I was on a trip, and I picked it up at the airport just because, it was a cool title, and I thought, hey, that sounds awesome. And as I read it on that trip, and I know a lot of people feel different views. I talked to another professor here at BYU last week, and he said, oh, 4-hour work week, that's terrible. He didn't agree with it and everything. And I said, well, you have to be kind of the same mindset as Tim is, and you have to kind of be in an area where you can do that. So there's a lot of great stuff in the book. There's a lot of stuff that you just throw out what you don't want. Like for me, all the last chapters on travel and all that, they're wonderful, but it doesn't really apply to me, and I don't care about that. But there's a lot of good ideas, and the best part about it is everything is negotiable, and I like that term from it. We so often think you have to live your life a certain way, you have to study a certain way, you have to conduct business a certain way, and that's not the case. There's always a different way to do something. And one of the best opportunities nowadays is with the internet and businesses on the web. And so it's great to talk today about that. And then the last part I want to talk about is just my story, specifically what I've done. And most of that entails outsourcing work to other people. So my time is freed up. So let me just go through a few slides. And these stats come from Tim's website, but I thought some of them were interesting. 63% of employees want to work less, up from 46% in 92. So a lot of people are working a lot of hours and burning out, 26% of adult Americans report being on the verge of a serious nervous breakdown. You don't want to do that. When you get out, honestly, sometimes if you complete college or graduate school or whatever, especially if you're a doctor, you're going to obviously be in a place where you're going to work some ridiculous hours. But even if you're a lawyer, an accountant, or many areas of business, they're going to work you to death a little bit. And what we're going to talk about a little bit is just balance in life. 40% of workers describe their office environment as most like a real-life survivor program. And that's one of the areas, just personally for me, of business that I've never done well at. I'm not a good politician in a business environment. And generally when it gets political, then I look to move on or do something else. And that's just my personality. So over the years, I've had to decide what I'm good at and where I do well. And then the things I don't do well, don't get involved with that or have somebody else do the work. But business politics for me is not a good thing. Only 14% of Americans take 2 weeks or more at a time for vacation. And I thought, oh yeah, but I thought I've been on vacation, but then I realized I probably have 6 weeks worth of vacation right now with the one company I work with. So actually I don't take vacations very often. But I'll explain to you why what I'm doing now, my whole life isn't a vacation now because I still work a lot, but I at least have a lot more free time, and I filled up that free time with other things besides work, but I have the ability to do that now, which I didn't have before. 88% of employees say they feel that they have a hard time juggling work and life. That's one of the areas I wanted to focus on, and just a couple slides here. 32% of workers cited work-life balance as the top priority in their careers, followed by job security. So a lot of people, that's very important. If you're a Latter-day Saint and you're raised in the church, obviously it's even more important to you. You really know the value of family. And that becomes a difficult thing sometimes between your work life and family life. And it's like any other principle. You make decisions, what you're going to do about that now, just like, we always encourage, you make a decision when you're a little kid that you're not going to smoke or something. And but even work life, you can make decisions now that you'll have a decent balance in that. And sometimes that makes hard decisions, but you can do it. So how are they actually doing? 88% of employees say they have a hard time juggling work and life, which is most of them. 70% of working fathers and working mothers report they don't have enough time for their children, which is a really bad one. And 64% of Americans report that time pressures on working families are getting worse, not better. I thought that conference over the weekend was interesting, and this was from just 4 days ago. This is President Monson saying, I plead with you not to let those important things pass you by as you plan for that elusive and non-existent future when you'll have time to do all that you want to do. Instead, find joy in the journey now. And this was just a few days ago. In fact, there was some really good quotes on business stuff in Priesthood, but Priesthood, they always hold back on getting those on the web, so those aren't out there yet, but it was Elder Uchtdorf's talk, President Uchtdorf's talk. But this is a wonderful thing to think about, and if you remember this was a Sunday morning talk, and it was mostly about change in our lives and having priorities. And he just said, we will always have stress. There will always be some sort of stress in your life. And so you learn to enjoy it. In fact, if you think how many, if you listen to conference or watch that weekend, there was a lot of talks related to that point of enjoying life, even when times are very difficult. And for anybody who has any stock in the stock market the last few weeks, it can be a little stressful. You look at your retirement, you look at things going down, and you can think, but that's life. Honestly, that's just what happens. I don't like it's sad, but okay, just a couple slides on email addiction. And I'm going to skip past some of these quick, but 66% read email 7 days a week and expect to receive a response the same day. I remember, obviously, I'm not super old, but I'm plenty old enough because I've been in business for 25 years or so that, for most of that time there was no email. And then email came into the picture, and then suddenly it came along over the years with this expectation that you would just respond immediately to it. But you don't have to do that. In fact, we'll talk about some of Tim's recommendations there. 61% continue to check email on vacation. One of the best vacations I had last year was going on a cruise with my gigantic family. I'm the oldest of 11 brothers and sisters, and my mom passed away in the year 2000. My dad remarried, so I had 4 more siblings, so there's 15 of us, and we all went on a cruise together with all of our spouses, so we had 28 of us. And the best part about the cruise, no laptop, no phone. And for me, it was just nice not to think about work. I enjoy those times when I can just throw it aside. It's a good thing to do. That last part's kind of interesting. Crackberry was the official winner of the 2006 Word of the Year, basically talking about people with a BlackBerry addiction and unable to go more than 5 minutes without checking email. How many of you have BlackBerries or iPhones, something like that, where you check email? So quite a bit. Yeah, it can become an addiction, but do what you can not to. These are some of the things I thought were interesting. How many here are married? Okay, see that first one? If you're doing email in bed, you got a problem, because there's probably at least one other thing that you could be doing in bed that's better than email. I will admit that. Yeah, I've been married 26 years. I'm a happily married man. And if you're doing it in class, I know some classes, okay, it's okay if you take notes, but even so. Business meetings, I have enough friends in business and stuff, and we'll go to lunch, and for the most part, I just either keep my phone on vibrate or turn it off, because I'm talking to a real person at that moment. And it's always important to remember that when you're talking to somebody, and the phone is secondary always to the real customer, because I see it in business environment too, where people will be on the phone and you're right there, and that's really frustrating. But email should always be secondary. I just had to add this because it's really fascinating. Psychiatrists in King's College London administered IQ tests for 3 groups. This is an IQ test being administered at the same time. First did nothing but perform the IQ test. Second was distracted by email and ringing phones. And the third was stoned on marijuana. So the results, not surprisingly, the first group did better than the other 2 by an average of 10 points. The emailers, on the other hand, did worse than the stoners by an average of 6 points. Which is telling, isn't that? Does anybody know who Jesse Evans Smith is or was? Anybody remember Jesse Evans Smith, that name? She was married to the prophet Joseph Fielding Smith. And I'm sorry, because this marijuana thing just reminded me of a story of hers. It is. It's serious. And this Brother Flake tells this story, and you may have heard it, but I just think it's hilarious. So she would go with her husband, who was the prophet, to priesthood meetings once in a while. He'd bring her all to these meetings. And one of those times, he asked her to speak. And this is just the priesthood. And she gets up and says, what do you get when you grow marijuana on the stake farm? This is a priesthood meeting, and your husband is the prophet, right? What do you get when you grow marijuana on the stake farm? So she waits, and she says, high priest. And you got to admit, it's a good joke. All right, email poll. How many of you check email during the school day? Raise your hand. How many of you text during a date? How many of you want to remain single forever? I'm sorry, the texting thing is just another... My oldest son is 25. He goes to UVU, and he comes over on Sundays for dinner, and he texts the whole time we're having dinner, I'm like, hey, we're right here. You don't need to be texting somebody somewhere else. And anyway, personal gripe. Let's move on to the 4-hour work week specifically. These are 4 areas of the book, these are the 4 main areas of the book. And these areas, just briefly, I want to go over. The first one is define objectives. This is where he talks about what's really important in your life. I'm going to go over this a little in the next slide and refer to it as lifestyle planning. The next area is eliminating distractions to free up time. He really talks about the point of being effective with your time rather than just being merely efficient. Doing what, it's in the to the 80-20 rule. You focus on the 20% that really makes a difference, and to some extent you take the 80% and you push over on the side, but you really focus on that 20%. And you learn to stop, you learn to set aside interruptions, and you learn to say no. The third one, and this is the one that I'll specifically talk about in my personal life, was learning to automate cash flow. That sounds so much, when you just see automate cash flow, that sounds like a cheap business book or a seminar. But you really can do this nowadays because of the internet. And when I read his book, I was already doing this, and that's why I really like the book, because I'm like, here's a guy that's speaking my language. I was like, yeah, I do that. It works, I had people working for me all over the world, and I'll talk about it later, but I PayPal money to people all the time, and that's how I get work done. And I don't care where they live. I'm always surprised when I find out they live in the United States. Once in a while they do. But for the most part, I'm sending to Singapore, Australia, and India. Those have been the main 3 areas that I send work to. And the last one is liberate yourself from traditional expectations. And this is designing your job to increase your mobility. And I'll spend time on that one too. So this is a fantastic book for e-business people, because literally his business is more of an e-business. But if you're in this area of doing work on the web or automating anything through the web, in that area, this is extremely valuable. All right, lifestyle planning. This is area, at least this is what I got about. Most of us will focus on retirement. Either we're cashing a bunch of options, or we're selling a company, or we're retiring, and that becomes the date when we do fun stuff, or we're going to go on trips with our family. And he makes a great point that, first of all, the math, and this is his word, the math doesn't add up. You have to have a lot of money in retirement nowadays to just quit working. And considering that you're going to live longer and longer, I mean, one of the largest growing populations nowadays is those people in their 90s and over 100 years old, and that keeps growing. It's tough to think you're going to quit work at 50 or 60 and just cruise for the next 50 years, unless you've got a gob of money. His view is kind of like, you should enjoy what you're doing now. You should be thinking about fun things that you should do that really are exciting to you. I put a few of those up there: doing things with your family, doing charitable service in a foreign country. That's always one. Going to school. This may sound a lot more interesting later, but I'm a student, again, here at BYU right now, and the reason I've come back to BYU is because I learned how to automate my business, and immediately when I did it, I suddenly thought, now what? I was like, I'll tell you later on, I have half-time at one job, and then I had my own company, and as soon as I did that, suddenly I found myself with 2 or 3 days a week open. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I always want to come back to school. So I don't have any classes in this building, but they're in some other buildings, and it's been really fun to be the old guy in class, although I am suffering in Statistics 221 right now. But I am hedging my bet by outsourcing, not my homework, but I did hire a tutor. I will talk about cheating later, but that's a different subject. The end of time management. This is what he refers to it in the book. And these are just a few things, and I think they're good. You turn off the audible alert. You only check email twice a day. And honestly, this is Tim's view of the world. I have a hard time doing this. I don't have to check email every 5 minutes by any means, but it's part of my addiction. When I get up, I can't not do email. I have to see what's going on, if anybody wrote anything overnight. His point is that if you do email first thing in the morning, suddenly your day goes like, you go off to the side. What you should be doing, in his view, is you take your hardest task, the one that you most need to complete during the day, and you do that first thing in the morning before 11 o'clock. And then you check email at noon, then you check email at 4. And there's a method to his madness, really, in this. When you work at a company, email flies around. A lot of people expect you to quickly respond to their every need, and you really don't have to. If your boss is doing that, he wants to know, and you don't want to get fired sometimes. Yes, you do. But a lot of times, if you just say, no, I'm going to respond at this time, and I'm going to read at this time, you'll be much more effective. Same thing for phone calls. His view is, you don't dink around on the phone with somebody. You don't say, hey, dude, what's up? And you start talking. Everybody answers the phone like, what's up? Or how you doing? And then you feel obligated to start telling your last week history. And if you're at work and you're trying to get something done, in fact, now that I think about it, all these things apply to school life too. In fact, for me, the whole thing that's hit me new is the homework thing. I'm not used to this homework thing. Suddenly I'm used to finishing, before 5 during the day, and now I have stuff that I have to do at night. And that's been a little new, but same thing applies. If I do it first thing, then I'm done and I can move on with life. Now, the last one there is meetings. Meetings should be held to make decisions. And meetings can waste just an enormous amount of time. I remember from just a church perspective, I remember somewhere along the line, one of my colleagues realizing that sometimes we view meetings, we think that we're doing something because we're having a meeting. And many times that's not the case at all. The meeting's sometimes an escape from doing something. In the business world, a lot of times it can be an escape, unless it's, unless there's an agenda, unless you keep it to the time schedule, unless you already know what you're going in for. And sometimes it's good to have brainstorming meetings, but most time it's better to go into a meeting and know exactly what the purpose is and keep moving from there. In fact, I had a quote here, and I can't even remember if it was not a quote, but it was just something I remember on meetings, and it was Jack Welch, chairman of GE, and I think it was him that he would generally have a lot of meetings standing up. So there's a little table, in his office, and you come to a standing meeting, which is actually a good idea because then you're never comfortable enough to kick back and fall asleep, and things happen quickly that way. This is an aside, but it's just kind of interesting because it's another thing I learned. My brother in 2001 said, "Hey, let's do Ironman." And I was like, okay. And I had done a lot of triathlons, but Ironman is that. You swim almost 2.5 miles, you bike 112 miles, and then you run a marathon. And I only had 45 to 60 minutes to train a day. That was, at that point I was commuting to a job in Salt Lake City, and I just couldn't fit any more time. So for me, my morning schedule is usually I get up at 5:30, I have scripture study till 6, then we have family scripture study at 6 to 6:30, and then nowadays I play the piano from 6:30 to, I have a schedule. But I only have 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm training for a race that takes all day. I learned that I had to combine, at least in that case, combine a couple things. So what I would do is I would listen to either scriptures or things when I would run or do it. And I thought, okay, now I'm getting my exercise and this at the same time. By the way, you can always download the whole book, and listen to it too. And in fact, the reader's pretty good. I've read the whole book. I've listened to it a couple times when I'm driving, with family somewhere. And generally, if you're listening to something, you can a lot of times do something else. Again, this is kind of against Tim's view of the world. Tim's view is you don't multitask. He views multitasking as bad. You focus on what you're doing, you get it done, you move the next thing and get it done, and you're effective. And you don't just blow a whole day by doing whatever. And the last part that I want to go over is this idea of relative income. And this is an interesting thing to think about. And, this is one of those areas you can agree or disagree about, but he talks about two types of income. One is absolute income, and that's based on a single variable, and that's the dollar, right? So this is the first one in here. You got Jane Doe makes $100,000 a year. That's $2,000 a week for 50 weeks. That's taking 2 weeks out for vacation, so we've got 50 times 2,000, and that's 100,000. But she's working 80 hours a week, which is a huge amount of hours, but she is. And then we've got John making $50,000 a year at $1,000 each of the 50 weeks, but he only works 10 hours. So she's making $25 an hour. If you look at all the hours she's spending, he's making $100 an hour. So in the case of relative income, he is, in his case, he always refers to him as richer. He's 4 times richer. And yearly income is one of those things that's kind of just stuck in our head that, I make $100,000 or I make $25,000. But honestly, the most important thing is you're making money, but how much time do you have? And for me, that's been one of the most important things of this book and my own journey in this area is that time is a much more valuable asset than money. Yes, you've got to make enough money to support your family and get by or, do what you need to do. But, I have lots of friends that make ridiculous amounts of money, and sometimes they don't have any life besides they're making money, and that's just not worth it. I would much rather have lots of time and enough to get by and support the family. And now, I told you I'm going to school, so I'm paying my tuition. My son who's going to UVU's tuition, my son at the University of Utah, he was at BYU and now he's transferring back here next year. So 3 tuitions, and then my other son who comes home from a mission in Japan, so it'll be 4 tuitions. So anyway, so I had to figure out how to make more money. So let me move on to my story and tell you just how I kind of came about what I do. And hopefully this will make sense to a few of you. 96 to 2001, I was part of a successful interactive agency. We built websites for all kinds of companies and Hollywood things. We did Shrek movie sites and all these things, and it was a neat company. But in 2000, in an accident, that's my daughter Molly, I lost my daughter and my mother in an accident. And it was devastating for me, and it was one of those life-changing experiences. Very difficult to lose a child. She was a 6-year-old, and but to lose your mother in the same accident, so it was a very difficult time. And after that, I switched jobs in 2000. And it could have been that I just, I'd been at that job for the last 5 years or so, but after the accident and everything, it was just a different world for me a little bit. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't sad or anything, because, to be honest with you, those of you who are Latter-day Saint, the Holy Ghost completely did his job, and we were comforted, and it turned out to be a very, very spiritual experience. But at the same time, my work life, my schedule didn't feel the same anymore, and so I switched jobs. Okay, so the problem is, I switched jobs in 2001, right after 9/11, to another agency. And ad agency world tanked after that. So later on, I lost my job there, and then I spent 6 months unemployed. And for me, that was hell. No work and no money, and I didn't have enough savings, and I was starting to live off of home equity loan, and I got that before I knew I was going to be unemployed. And, it was just a year before, or 2 years before, I'd lost a daughter, and now I'm unemployed. I'd never been unemployed, ever. And it was just, I can't explain to you how sick it made me feel. In fact, just lately, because of some of the, stuff going on, I've had a number of neighbors lose jobs, and every time I hear about it, it just makes me sick. So it took me 6 months. I found a new job. I was working at myfamily.com, and I was brought in there to help with branding. And then, 6 months after that, I lost a job there, because they decided that branding wasn't real important anymore. Or, at that point, it just wasn't part of the business model, and that was my expertise. And so 6 months after that, I lost the job again. So I was a little desperate, to say the least, and I vowed at that time, never to rely on a single income again. And that was just for me, and, plenty of people do fine with one income, but for me, because what I'd been through over the years, I vowed I couldn't rely on that again, and I needed to have multiple incomes just so I know that I felt I would feel better. So I had to figure out what I knew. I had spent the last 20 years doing marketing, so I understood marketing really well. I understood startup companies and marketing the company. I enjoyed that. I knew that the internet was fantastic, had a lot of experience there, but I had never developed anything on my own. And I actually wanted to do that. I actually wanted to learn that. I had managed a lot of web jobs, but we had a whole crew of web developers. But I just had an interest. I wanted to learn how to do it, because I thought that would be valuable. I had been at Ancestry.com, and so I knew that there was a group of people that made this great money being an affiliate for them. And an affiliate is when you have a website, and someone comes to your website, and then they get forwarded to this other website, and then they buy something there, and then you make a commission on it. So I had, before I left there, I knew that program, and I thought I could probably make some money that way. And then I knew that search engine optimization was important, and my brother and I both worked on different websites, and so I knew that was something else I could do. So first thing I did was secure a job, one job. And a friend of mine had started this new company called Cavion Test Security, and I came in as a co-founder and head of marketing. And it's a really fascinating company, and we detect cheating on tests. And I'm known as an expert on cheating, and I don't share any of that information at college. But last week I spoke in Alaska on the 10 most wanted cheaters. I gave a presentation called the 50 Ways Students Cheat on Tests. I did undercover work last year at UVU, not at BYU, just because I'm friends with the testing center there. Did undercover work cheating and stealing a test to see if it could be done, and yes, it could be done. And then I write this newsletter to over 6,500 people now. They're academics and testing professionals. And so I started to grow some of the things I wanted to grow. I built the whole Cavion website. I did an HTML email. I had a job, so I was secure again. And one of the best things that happened was after 1 year in business, we decided the office wasn't for us, and we decided we'd just work out of home offices. because half of our company, we're only like 15 people, worked in different areas of the United States anyway. And so we just all moved home, and so for the last 5 years, that's the way we work. We work out of our homes. And so I'm already kind of, if you know the 4-hour work week, I'm already in that mode already. I'm already at home working now, and my work is simply done by what has to be done and not the hours in the day. I just know that I have to get an email out, I have to prepare for a conference, I have to do submissions for a conference. I have tasks, but they're not based around 8 hours of work necessarily. They're just things I have to get done. And one of the great things happened to me was in January of this year, I moved to half-time at Cavion because my other business, which I'll talk about next, was starting to grow. And so I was able then to divide off to just 2 days a week, 2.5 days a week over here, and then my business that I ran by myself, I'd have the other time. So my other business, it's called Big Blue Robot for no reason whatsoever, just because when I first started, I needed to have a checking account, and I needed to, I mean, what's even more important nowadays is I needed to register a domain name, and I just thought, Big Blue Robot, you know, and it's stuck, and now I'm stuck with it. I mean, I could change it, but I don't really care. The clients are happy, and that's what matters, and they don't really ever pay attention to what the name of the company is. But the way we started this, or the way I started it, was I had come from Ancestry.com, and so I knew that there was this affiliate business, so I built about 20 websites. I own all the censusyears.net, so 1880, I mean, all those years. And then did search engine optimization so that they would rank well in Google. And then as people would find these sites, then they'd use the search box, which only does one simple thing. The search box on the website throws them over to Ancestry.com. And when they would subscribe there, then I would get a commission on that. When I was at Ancestry, I realized that there was a lot of, you know, there were some affiliates that were making $20,000, $30,000 a month just being an affiliate with a website. Now, these are websites that ranked extremely well and had huge traffic. But I thought, you know, I just need a little bit of money. And it worked. And honestly, revenue from those sites, I still have all of them. That supplemented my income over the last 5 years, and those websites alone paid for all 3 of my son's missions. They went to Ireland, Argentina, Japan. Anybody go to those areas? Cool. And literally just from those little websites. And that was one area. So I had a little revenue coming from there, but up to this point, I'm still doing the work by myself, right? I built the sites. I'm doing link trades, which were reciprocal, and spending time with people that way. So I needed to do an experiment. This one was built a new site, and this one was, there's a lot of home security system companies here, obviously, in the Provo area. And so I'm friends with some of those people that own them. And I said, I want to build a website and generate leads for the company for inside sales. So I built the site, but instead of me doing all the link building, and understand when you do search engine optimization, the whole purpose is you're trying to get a website to rank. Really, it only matters if you're in the top 10. Once you're beyond the first page of Google or anything, there's not much traffic. And part of that process is lots and lots of links, and the links have to be relevant. And so my site needed to rank well for the term home security systems. And so all the links that come to the website say home security systems in the blue link. And part of the link building is these things: directory submission, social bookmarking, blog postings, links, reciprocal links. And then I outsourced the content development also. And the content development means I needed to have a writer write on the stuff. And so I checked these different forums, and there was a forum, and a guy said, hey, I need some money. I'm willing to write up to 25-page report for $100. I'm like, $100, cool. And he actually did a fantastic job. He wrote the report I needed. He wrote a few other things. And this wasn't somebody in India. He was in California. And you have to understand that on the web, it's a different world. It's not just, you know, the people who are, you know, a different life in a different country. There are people, you know, obviously you could be right here and you could say, I need $50 this weekend. What can I do? And, you know, there are forums and different places you can go and advertise, I can do this writing or I can do that. And, you know, people PayPal the money. I mean, that's how it goes across. So my goal was to rank the website in the top 10 for home security systems. And that's in the top 10 out of 75, it varies all the time, but right now it's around 72 to 75 million indexed pages. So you have to be in the top 10 out of 75 million pages, and within 8-10 months I did it. And that website's remained there in the top 10, and actually I have a second website in the top 10. I'm taking over the top 10 for that term right now. So I just want to call this part accidental expansion. I had a friend come to me who owned a company, and he said, we really need some help with search engine optimization. I know you do it. And I said, I only do it for my own websites. I don't really work for anybody else, which was a really stupid thing to say. Now that I look back at it, because I needed the money. I needed the money. Remember, I had lost a job for a long period of time, and when you don't have income coming in, you pay a mortgage and bills and all those things. That requires a lot of money that you're suddenly eating up in debt. So finally, I twisted my head back on correctly after he said, we have a budget. And I started work for him. Within 1 month, I received another call. It was a company I had talked to a year prior. And this was one in this niche that I work on, or niche, whatever you want to call it. And it's mainly the market I work in now. It's called online reputation management. It's a form of search engine optimization, but it's a weird one. I have clients that have a problem with their reputation on the web. So if you search their brand name, they're a negative post. That's one of the good and bad things about the web is if you don't like a company, all you have to do is go out to scam.com, complaintsboard.com, ripoff report, and you start posting about that company, and lo and behold, those will show up in the rankings of that brand. And it wreaks havoc on companies. And so when I work with those companies, what I do is I actually do search engine optimization on about 10 websites at a time, all the positive sites, and the goal is to move those into the rankings, and in the process shove out the bad sites. It works really well quickly with Yahoo and MSN search engines. Google, to be honest with you, Google favors negative rankings. Google view of the world is we're helping out the customer because we want to give them fair. They need to know that some people hate this company or whatever it is. But even so, you can still do that. And yes, this is manipulating the search engine rankings, but it's a business. and that's why I think it's funny when people think that the results are just solely based on some algorithm and you can't do anything about it. And that's not the case at all. I mean, it's an industry out there of doing this, and it's been a successful business. So my next step was figuring out how to outsource. Let's see, 36 minutes, I've got about 10 minutes left. I scoured the web for forums on SEO. I discovered forums where there's a lot of individuals offering services. And then for a year, and even now I do it all the time, I hired multiple people all the time, and I kept a spreadsheet of who I hired, what their forum name was, what price I paid, whether their service was good, and whether I got a good report back, because I'm always getting reports back, right? They're either getting Excel files or things saying, I did this many directory submissions, and then I can check on all the links. And I kept a record of that, and then all the services, like I told you before, this money is just going out via PayPal. I mean, that's the preferred method of payment for everybody that I work with, except for the new one I'm working with is now Google money. But I kept a record of all this so that later on I could decide who were the best. To be honest with you, some of them took my money, and that's just part of the business in this world when you do some of that work on the web. They didn't finish the job sometimes. Luckily, they're all fairly small amounts of money, but I have enough clients that I'm leveraging multiple clients for a lot of work. So that was what I needed to do. I needed to find out who was good. So just a moment on outsourcing and value. I'm not going to read this whole thing too, but I just want you to, just a little bit of it. This is a post on a typical forum, and it says, full-time SEO assistant wanted $450 a month. Okay? He's looking for an assistant. It's a full-time position that requires 40 hours of work per week, paying a monthly salary of $450. Everybody want that job? Do you know how much that is an hour? That's about $2.81 an hour. So, I'm fascinated by this because there's, following a card, good written English skills, internet connection, able to discuss projects via MSN, internet, trustworthy. There's a lot of things right there. So this was fascinating to me. This was posted on June 9th, 2008. Within 5 hours, there were 14 responses, people wanting the job. 14 responses within 5 hours. And then here's a little bit more on the thread after that. I thought it was fascinating. Are you kidding? $450 a month with 40 hours a week? We don't work in sweatshops. And then the person writes back to them. As you can see from the above post, there are many people who are pleased with $450 per month. And by the way, it's actually a good salary that is above the minimum in Lithuania. And again, you have to remember, this is the web. And the next post is probably one of the best ones there. This is just the height of ignorance. Do you think that wages, rent, cost of living, food, etc. is the same across the world? It's called relativity. This is a decent wage in many countries, as displayed by the number of replies. This is what the internet does. It lifts the restrictions of our locality to allow us to interact with the benefit of those across the world. Go flame somewhere else. And then the next day, thank you for the interest, guys. I've now got enough people for this work, so the offer is now closed. That was a fascinating post for me to see that, because the person said very clearly, this is the job I want, this is how much I'm willing to pay. And to be straight with you, before this, he had a post about a week before for $350 a month, and maybe he didn't get as much traction on it because the price went up to $450. But at $450, he got plenty of people saying they would do the job. So there are resources available to get work done if it's work that can be done this way. And in my case, this was exactly the kind of work I needed. I don't have an assistant that does this kind of work. I have very particular tasks that go out to a group of people. Let's see. So in mine, it settled on 2 to 3 individuals that had done good work with me, and I had to know they had enough employees to support my businesses. Right now, I'm probably working with, because of reputation management, it's probably 50 sites by myself. Understand that's just me, but I can do it because all the work I do all the strategy, and I say, I need you to do this, I need this group to do that, I need this, and then every month the work gets done. I negotiated a fee for fixed fee service monthly arrangements, so I said, this type of site I want a fixed fee per month, because I have a fixed fee retainer that I charge, and I want a fixed fee here. Bam, instant time. But let me add this little danger, have backups. For the last 4 months I've been using a company, and they've done great work. And then 3 weeks ago, suddenly they disappeared. And that was one of the problems of doing work on the web. Thanks. So luckily I had backups. And I went to my backups, and I've said, okay, I have this many sites, and I'm able to negotiate all the time because I have a lot of sites I'm working with. And now I have a new company that's working with me on this. But just a little bit about the business. When I go into business with clients, I have clear success objectives. I work off of a fixed fee monthly retainer, so I know exactly what's coming in. I leverage successful work into new work. I ask for customer referrals. I'll say, if you've had a good experience, can I send that on to similar type companies? Because you always have to be feeding, in my case, you have to be filling that bucket, Because even though I have a good business right now, economic times are hard. In fact, this week I did lose one client because they decided to move their money in a different area of marketing, and I know that will happen. And so I'm always trying to have new clients. And my focus is just to have a one-man shop. For me, that's all I want at this point. I can grow some different things into a larger business, but for me, this business, one-man shop. Another thing, just from my own experience, I have no partner, and so I have no headaches. I've worked with partners and even family members, and my dad had partners for the years. And sometimes you can have a great partner, but my experience wasn't that great, and I knew I wanted no partners. And so it's only me who makes the decisions. It's only me who meets with the clients. And that's all I wanted. Remember, I told you I'm not a super political person, so any politics is personal. It's just me. I don't have to deal with anyone else. And the good results from this was, I told you I went into a lot of debt over those years and I've been able to pay off all my debt. Literally all my debt, except for my mortgage. So we owe nothing anymore. And part of that was a goal. And just to be truthful to you, that was one of my goals with, I knew that being out of debt was important. And that will be the same for all of you as you go into business. And it doesn't matter if you're getting money from a venture firm, whatever, it's still debt. And I've seen too many business owners think, it's venture money, I can just blow it, and they just burn through money. You always want to treat your investors, I mean, that's literally like gold, and because they'll kick you out if you don't. So, just in closing, time is the most valuable asset. I work at home. I work half-time for one company, the other. I'm able to do things that I enjoy doing now because I have some time. I went to Peru last year for some humanitarian work. I mountain bike every day, except Sunday, a lot. I'm learning to play the piano. I played when I was 11, and I quit when I was like 13, and I thought, I'm going to learn how to play the piano again. And like I told you before, I'm a student back here at BYU, and I really enjoy it. Actually, there's two weird screens in here next, and I'll close. This is just a plug because I think the technology is so cool. Any of you use trailguru.com? Anyway, just because I mountain bike all the time, if you have a GPS or an iPhone, it tracks your whole ride, and then you send this on a website, and I use it on Facebook all the time so people can see where I rode. Anyway, so you can go to my Facebook page and you'll see that. So just in conclusion, you want to be effective with your time, not just efficient. You need to have really important goals. And that doesn't mean just making a gob of money. That means how will you treat your spouse? How will you treat your children? How will you fulfill callings at church? How will you do service in your community? Those are important things, and they're way outside of just business. Understand what you're good at, and my recommendation is just for me, but I think it's good for anybody. When you're not good at something, you either hire somebody to do that or find some way to outsource that work. Use people who are good. And any business, any successful business person is going to tell you the same thing. Use who's good. And you learn to say no. And again, time is a valuable asset there. This is my email address if you want to email me for anything. On Facebook, I'm Don Sorensen in Provo, Utah. And, understand that, I'm a dad with teenagers and older kids. And they first, when I was on Facebook, they thought, Dad, what are you on Facebook? But if you look out there now, there's a lot of people my age on Facebook. And then if you ever want to email me with eBusiness stuff, I always just like to talk about it. I'm always excited, just like I know Brother Richards is and others. I love hearing about business ideas. And I don't, besides offering you, advice, I don't have much else to give there. I don't have gobs of money to invest or things like that. But I always love hearing about ideas. So if you ever have anything you want to discuss, feel free to email me about that. Thank you for your time.